The endless refill. The neon sign for Lou's 24-hour diner buzzed with a sound like a dying cicada, casting a sickly pink glow over the vinyl booths. It was 3:14 a.m. Mark pulled into the gravel lot, his eyelids heavy from 6 hours of interstate driving. Inside, the air smelled of burnt chicory and stale grease. A waitress with a faded beehive haircut and a name tag that read Clara glided over before he even opened his menu. She poured black coffee into a thick ceramic mug. "Keep it coming," Mark muttered, taking a massive gulp. It was scalding, bitter, and instantly cleared the fog in his brain. He opened his laptop to work, losing himself in spreadsheets. Minutes or hours passed. Every time his mug neared empty, a pale hand appeared from his periphery, tilting a glass pot. "Another drop, honey?" Clara would drawl. By the third refill, Mark noticed his heart wasn't just beating, it was vibrating. His fingers flew across the keyboard, a manic blur. He glanced at the bottom right of his screen to check the time. 3:14 a.m. He frowned. He looked up at the analog clock above the counter. The second hand was twitching violently, trapped between the 12 and the 1. "Hey, Clara, your clock broken?" Mark called out. No response. The only other patrons, a trucker in a flannel shirt and an old couple in the corner, sat perfectly rigid, forks hovering inches from their mouths. Mark's chest tightened. A profound, unnatural heat bloomed in his stomach. He tried to stand, but his legs were entirely numb. When he looked down, he gasped. His skin was translucent. Beneath it, his veins weren't pumping blood. They were black, churning with a dark, oily liquid that looked exactly like French roast. Clara appeared beside him again, her eyes completely devoid of irises, just milky white spheres reflecting the pink neon. She raised the glass pot. "You can't leave yet, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice echoing inside his skull. "The pot is never empty, and neither are you." Mark tried to scream, but all that poured past his teeth was steaming, boiling coffee, flooding the keyboard as Clara tilted the pot once more. 2. Special order. The hipster crowd at the Daily Grind in Portland took their coffee seriously, but no one took it more seriously than the head barista, a gaunt man named Julian, who wore a leather apron like a shroud. Sarah only went in because it was raining heavily. She ordered a simple vanilla latte. "We don't do syrups here," Julian said, his voice flat, eyes fixed on the silver espresso machine. "We only serve the origin espresso. It extracts essence." "Fine, whatever. Just a double shot," Sarah sighed, checking her phone. She watched him work. He didn't use coffee beans from a hopper. Instead, he reached into a small, velvet-lined cooler beneath the counter and pulled out a wet, pulsing mass that looked terrifyingly like a walnut wrapped in raw meat. He dropped it into the grinder. The machine screamed, a high-pitched, agonizing wail that Sarah had to cover her ears to block out, though no one else in the cafe seemed to notice. Julian handed her a ceramic cup containing a thick, dark crimson liquid with a dense, frothy crema. "On the house," he smiled, showing too many teeth. "A very exclusive blend." Curiosity overcame her disgust. She took a tiny sip. It didn't taste like coffee. It tasted like childhood summers, her first kiss, the smell of her grandmother's house, and the exact moment she found out she passed her bar exam. It was pure, unadulterated euphoria. She downed the whole cup in 3 seconds, her eyes rolling back in sheer bliss. "My God," she breathed. "What is that?" "Memories," Julian whispered. "Freshly harvested." Sarah laughed, thinking it was a pretentious marketing gimmick, and walked out into the rain. But when she got home, she looked at the photos on her fridge. Her mother's face looked completely unfamiliar. She tried to recall her childhood dog's name, but there was just a blank, gray void in her mind. She couldn't remember her own phone number. Panicking, she sprinted back to the cafe. The doors were locked, the lights out. But through the glass, she could see Julian in the back, holding a silver scoop, leaning over a sleeping patron, gently inserting the instrument into the man's ear to extract a glowing, wet lump of gray matter for tomorrow's morning rush.
3. The tip jar. In a forgotten diner off Route 66, there sat a heavy glass jar next to the cash register. A piece of masking tape on the front read, "Tips for the road. Choose wisely." Inside the jar were no dollar bills or copper pennies. It was filled with small, jagged fragments of human bone, teeth with the roots still attached, and wedding rings caked in dried mud. A young hitchhiker named Toby pushed the doors open, his boots caked in dust. He had $3 to his name. He sat at the counter, shivering from the desert chill that had crept in with the dusk. The old man behind the counter, whose skin looked like cracked boot leather, slid a plate of stale cherry pie toward him. "Eat up, kid. You look like you've been running." "Thanks," Toby said, devouring the pie. When he finished, he realized he didn't have enough to cover the tax, let alone a tip. He looked nervously at the glass jar. "Don't worry about the cash," the old man rasped, polishing a glass with a dirty rag. "Just leave something in the jar. Everyone pays their dues here." Toby chuckled nervously. "I don't have anything but the clothes on my back." "You've got a whole body full of change, son." The old man stopped wiping the glass. His eyes locked onto Toby's left hand. Toby felt an involuntary, violent tremor in his left pinky finger. He watched in horror as the skin began to split perfectly down the knuckle. There was no pain, just a sickening pop as the bone detached itself cleanly from the joint, sliding out through his skin like a wet seed. It floated into the air, drifting across the counter, and dropped into the jar with a clear clink. "Pleasure doing business with you," the old man smiled. Toby scrambled backward, clutching his bleeding, shortened hand, and burst through the front doors into the desert night. But as he ran down the dark highway, he realized his hitchhiking thumb was already beginning to itch, the bone beneath the flesh shifting, ready to pay for his next meal. 4. Ground grounds. The roasted bean was built on the cheap, right at the edge of a gentrified neighborhood in Savannah. The owner, Marcus, didn't care that the construction workers had dug up a few unmarked, centuries-old wooden coffins during the plumbing installation. He just told them to dump the dirt in the back and get on with it. The cafe was an instant hit. The cold brew, in particular, had a strange, earthy richness that people lined up around the block for. Marcus called it his secret soil steep. One rainy Tuesday night, Marcus stayed late to clean the espresso machines. The cafe was dead quiet, save for the rhythmic drip, drip, drip of the industrial cold brew filtration system in the back room.
He went to empty the massive bin of spent coffee grounds. As he pulled the plastic liner out, he noticed the grounds weren't dry. They were squirming. Marcus blinked, pulling out his phone flashlight. The dark, wet grounds were moving in unison, like an army of black ants. He reached out with a gloved hand to touch them, but the mass surged upward, wrapping around his wrist. The glove dissolved instantly under a sudden, intense heat. He screamed, trying to shake it off, but the grounds climbed his arm, burrowing directly into his pores. They smelled of rot, wet earth, and old, forgotten agony. Through the walls of the cafe, whispers began to echo. Hundreds of voices speaking in an archaic colonial dialect, crying out for the sunlight they had been denied. Marcus fell to the tile floor, watching his own skin turn a dark, granulated black. The coffee grounds weren't just covering him, they were replacing his muscle, his fat, his blood. By midnight, the screaming stopped. When the morning shift barista unlocked the front doors at 6 a.m., she found Marcus's clothes lying in a neat pile behind the counter, completely filled to the brim with premium, perfectly fragrant espresso grounds.